Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I have Barbara back. We had promised a part two to our video. Hi Barbara, how are you?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So for folks who didn't catch the first video, just to get you up to speed, we were talking about the power of sand tray for adults and sand play for adults. And so Barbara had shared a little bit of information. We're going to echo some of that here. But why there's a part two is I actually had the chance to experience it with Barbara. So we're going to talk about that and like how that went. So all of our intentions for this video right here in the first part. For folks who haven't seen the first video, Barbara, what do you want to know about you before we jump in?
To know about me, I'm a licensed professional counselor based in Littleton, Colorado. I do lots of consultation, lots of teaching, and of course, individual therapy with usually complex trauma for adults. I'm a
Mhm.
mom, I'm a grandmother, and I am just a being human.
Love that. Yes, yes. And we were just talking before we hit record. How can we not love Barbara's background right now? Like this beautiful bookcase with all these things in it.
I love
Love
learning. Yeah.
it. Yes. So we wear lots of hats, which is also why we've been connected for years now.
Yeah.
For folks who are like Sand Tray, tell me how this works with adults. Like, can you give a broad overview just for anyone who hasn't seen that part one video from us?
So, a broad overview of sand when it comes to adults is that it's always an invitation. It's not a forced thing whatsoever. So, it's an invitation extended, and it can be help create from unconscious to consciousness, right? Because if we're trying to recreate new narratives with our clients, some things are just under consciousness. And a very streamlined, self titrating way of doing that is by creating something in the sand. And there you have it. There's like, wow, look at that. And now we can make new story and new connections about it. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And there are many ways to approach it, which is a little bit more too detailed to share now, but many ways to approach sand.
Yeah, I know I had asked you in our first video, like who's appropriate for sand? Do you have any thoughts here as you think about that
Yeah.
subconscious, now conscious? If there's any like restrictions or like best populations that this works with?
I would say anybody who feels drawn to the sand.
Mm,
So, and even if there's something called a flooded tray, so that might be a tray with so much in there, so much in there. It's not, it's information, and maybe that client might need a little more support as they do a
mm,
tray going forward. But I haven't bumped into anybody that is not appropriate. And in all the books that I've read and the trainings that I've done for over a decade, it's a drawing, it's a calling toward, and then observing and making some clinical hypotheses.
yeah, yeah. So when you had me do the tray myself, you had some psychoeducation you provided to help me get up to speed and kind of set some expectations for the
Yeah.
work. What's striking me as we're talking in this video is like you had this beautiful display of figurines, or what were the other words that we used? Not figurines,
Miniatures, like
miniatures. Yes.
miniatures, figurines. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know a lot of folks that do this work have walls or,
Yeah.
containers full of these little miniatures. But something that strikes me that I want to share in this video for folks is that they speak to you even before they're in the sand because you're like, hey, just like notice which ones kind of stand out to you or pop out to you. And that was my experience. Like I said to you, like, oh, this one's like shouting at me right now, which feels really interesting to share with folks on a video. Like, this one's yelling at me. Um,
Uh-huh.
but I feel like for those of us that are very creative, we're very visual,
Mhm.
sand works well, at least in my experience. Like, I continue to check back on the image that we created together in my head of like, oh, there's that image. Does it looking the same? Is it
Mhm.
shifting? So it
Mhm.
almost becomes a grounding exercise. And I don't know if that's common for a lot of your clients, but for me, it's been grounding since we met on that.
Yeah. I love that you're using it as a touchstone, Kara. I love that it lingers with you and it stays with you. And I appreciate how you because that is one of the things that what can be difficult for adults is to move away from strong cognitive thinking and go into an intuitive feeling and an impulse. That one,
Mm,
that one, that one, that one. And that can sometimes be a growth edge for a person that they have to think it and decide as opposed to this organic experience. And yes,
mhm.
it can be a grounding, a place to come back to and remember. And you did one tray, which was such a delight. And imagine going back and doing another tray, and
Mm,
watching how the tray shifts and changes as the psyche shifts and changes. and how
Hmm.
new connections are being made. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and just like this energy work that comes with it. So I'm kind of thinking about I've had the privilege of doing Jungian work with Alex, who's been on this channel a lot and that you're good friends with. I've had the privilege of doing some tarot. And a lot of these things feel like there's like this intuition, don't overthink it place, which as an Enneagram Fae is very free to not overthink
Oh.
everything. So I think that is compatible even for our very type A logic thinkers to be like, hey, I don't want you to overthink this. I just want you to notice what's standing out to you in this list, this group of figurines or miniatures. I
Mhm.
want you to play in the sand. And so, my experience for viewers of this video, we played with some textures. We looked at placement of where the things were, and then eventually there was movement to some of them, which was interesting. I didn't expect that to happen. Is that pretty common for the clients you've served that they have like these variations? Because I know you had invitations to move things around. Does this feel complete?
Mhm.
What are your
It's
thoughts
al-
here?
it's always an invitation. I think one of the phrases that I've learned to say is, and as you take in your tray, does anything want to be moved or added or taken away? And
Mhm.
with that invitation, the sand player can decide what is feeling good and right for them at that moment. And maybe it's like, I really want that to go over there. Well, what is it like for it to stay there? What would it be like to move there? Open-ended questions bring curiosity, and hopefully with that curiosity, insight. And with insight
Mhm.
can come some awareness and wisdom. So
Yeah, and then
invitation and then client choice.
right. And then there was this power of like saying it out loud what was happening when you asked those questions and hearing my own voice be like, this is what's happening. I'm
Mhm.
smiling because I don't know if we're allowed to put this in the video or not, but there was a little like handmade miniature that I had picked and
Mhm.
you had interpreted it to look at like one thing and I had
Yes.
interpreted it to look like another. And so open questions are really helpful because you were like, oh, well, what do you think about X? And I was like, no, it's Y. And you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like
I messed up. Oh
we're not going to
no.
assume that you interpret this particular miniature as a certain thing. And I thought that was
Exactly.
playful.
I'm glad you perceived it as playful. And yeah, that's a big thing. It's like, I do not interpret, I do not give meaning. I can make observations. Oh, I see this yellow and orange figurine is positioned next to this sphere. I can make
Mhm.
observations, and then the client makes interpretation because it's the client's psyche that's emerging, right? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, I love that.
I
Well, and I think
know.
there's just something you were like very much attuned to me because you were like saying, oh, there was a deep breath there. Of course, viewers, there were tears, like no surprise because it's like powerful work.
Yeah.
But like you were like so tuned in of like, oh, you shifted your body language there. Oh, you're on a different foot. Like, tell me what's going on. I saw you take a deep breath. And I think that feels really powerful as a therapist to be able
Mm.
to say, this is what I'm noticing. Here's that curiosity and how
Mhm.
that could look and sound. What
Well,
else
what
would
was
you
that?
add to that?
Well, I'm curious, what was that like for you to be so witnessed, right? Because that's
Mm,
what it is. It's really being witnessed. And when I think about secure attachment, I think about to be seen, to be soothed, to be safe, to be secure. So in that witnessing, that moment to moment attunement, that my entire being is just connected with your entire being and just sort of suspending time and space
mhm,
because that is the sacred container and vessel that we're co-creating. But my hope is that for the person on the receiving end, they're feeling, I don't know, safe to be vulnerable or safe to go get curious, things like that.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think for folks that have a attachment style that's not secure, this probably would have been powerful and maybe a little overwhelming. Of like, wow, I've never been so seen. I've never had someone focus on me so much that they might actually get a little itchy. That's what's coming to mind.
Yeah. And then on my end, and then I observe that, oh, this is so much for you right now. Do
Yeah.
you want to slow down? Is there anything that needs to shift or change? Because I truly trust the client's process. And creating a scene in the sand is one of the ways to access the client's process.
Mhm.
And through accessing it, the client can get up here and create that new story and restory and create that new narrative. But yeah, I'm so glad you could feel that, Kara.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm hearing that sand can be kind of a one and done like we did together, or it can be ongoing with clients that are doing that work, have that ultimate goal,
Mhm.
something that they're focused on.
Mhm.
Anything you would add here about clinicians who are interested in getting trained in sand, what that would look like, things, books you like, resources you like that might be helpful?
Yeah, if somebody is curious at all in sand, first step, in my opinion, would be to have your own sand experience.
Ooh,
And where we are, there are a number, not a huge amount, but there are a number of qualified sand players. So I would first do your own sand experience, and then if
ooh,
you're really, it's like, okay, I want to get into this. And then there are many organizations to contact. It might be at the state level, it might be at the national level. And it could be from the Jungian perspective, or it could be humanistic, or it could be Gestalt, it could be play. So there are many ways to access sand. Books are, any number of books. I have these books over here talk about sand as well.
ooh,
Being a Brainwise Therapist by Bonnie Badenoch, that has a really nice section about sand in it. And then these over here, these are more Jungian in style. The
nice.
Silent Workshop, Sand Play, and the Wisdom of Oz. Yeah, so,
Mm.
is a sand book. The daughter of Frank L. Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, is a sand player therapist. So she wrote this book, and she was lovely to learn from. So
That is
that's
so
what I would do.
cool.
Do your own work and then find the class that is speaks to you.
Yes, and I know that was the gift you gave me of like that invitation to come try it out because I'd never done sand before. But we could have this follow-up video and be like, oh my gosh, that was like way more emotional punch than I thought I would have for, that hour that we did that work together.
It
Hmm.
was. Okay. And I think there was also a readiness. There was maybe
Hmm.
a readiness. There needs to be that sense of safety to be vulnerable. So I really appreciate, what you brought. And that's where that therapeutic alliance and rapport is first in place before we approach the sand. Nah, I'm
Hmm.
going to take that back. Not before we approach the sand, but it can deepen. The sand can deepen as the therapeutic rapport builds. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for those open questions, that curiosity you named earlier. I think that those
Yeah.
go hand in hand, at least in my head.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And was it a scary at all for you to like, oh gosh, I'm an adult. I'm going to put these little figurines in the sand over here. Like sometimes feel like, oh, this is so silly. So what was your experience about that?
I mean, I think I know that a lot of sand players take a lot of thought in the miniatures that you have featured.
Yeah.
And so I think something to tell therapists in this video is like they weren't childlike figurines. They were miniatures that like spoke to life events, or I think
Mhm.
you had like, fantasy versus like real life events. You had some
Mhm.
different categories when you explained it to me after the fact.
Mhm.
Um, but I think if people think, oh, this is just like running your hands through sand or playing with little toys, I don't think that does it justice. So I would say the fact that the figurines were shouting at me in particular was like they weren't kid toys. They were like, oh my gosh, this is like representative of something, or like there's the subconscious saying, pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So I want to emphasize that to your question of like, I don't think it's childlike. I think it was just another vehicle to do deeper work. And it felt low risk because of the figurines or
Mhm.
miniatures. But then once you were actually in it and asking these open-ended questions, it was like the floodgates open and there was tears and like choked voice and like all this
Mhm.
stuff. Like it
Mhm.
felt like deep, deep work.
Mhm.
And that was
Mhm.
just the vehicle for it. So I don't know if that's affirming for you as someone who really loves to
Oh.
do this work.
Oh my goodness, it is. I was exposed to sand back in grad school, and I immediately had this like couldn't stop. And then I was on the Colorado Sand Play Therapy Association board for over a decade. So it's just part of the way I view therapy. I have a standing joke that I don't have an emotional support animal, but my co-therapist is my sand. Because if somebody gets really dysregulated, high or low, we can just sit by the sand and they can just put their fingers through it. And
Mm-hmm.
that in and of itself could be really regulating. Oh, it's cool. Oh, it's gritty. Oh, I can bury my hand. All of that can be a co-regulator beyond me in the therapy room. So, yeah,
Beautiful.
it can be surprisingly opening, surprisingly, but at your own pace. I hope that you
Hmm.
felt your pace. I was not there pushing you to do anything. It was your pace with me being the witness to you.
Hmm. Yeah, in
Yeah.
my experience, and I know this isn't necessarily going to be representative of everyone, it
Mhm.
felt like it had waves to it of like there was like it was like right here choked, then it kind of like receded a little bit so I could breathe, and it came back up and down. And some of that was because you're asking questions that helped me stay in it versus dissociate. Um, and but yeah, I think that was still self-paced more than you saying, let's go here and let's go here and like next question, next thing. So
Right,
that's interesting to
right.
reflect on. But yeah, I feel like it was really a gift that you gave me to say, this is another amazing tool in a therapist toolkit.
Yes,
So hopefully other clinicians watching this video will feel
I hope so
inspired to check it
too.
out a little bit more.
I hope so too, because in the world of trauma or in the world of healing, we need as much as we can gather right now, it feels like to me. And it does begin with the therapist. So
Mhm.
while you were watching those waves, while you were experiencing the waves, I was over there watching the crest and the fall. And then in
Yeah.
that attunement, leaning in with containment or stepping away because of your resiliency factor. Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's the work of the attuned moment to moment therapist is being so aware and intentional that hopefully the client is feeling held the whole time, and
Hmm.
being safe the whole time, even though it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So based on your recommendation of wanting an invitation for clinicians to try this on themselves or do a little bit of that work, obviously you're not the only option, but if they
right.
wanted to connect with you further, what would be the best way to go about that?
The best way to go about that is via my website, creativeandcaringcounseling.com. You can read about me. I know it's a big name, so I also bought barbaracounsels.com. So I have a big name.
Yeah.
And or Facebook. I have a professional Facebook page, which is another great way to reach out to me. And I'm happy to answer questions, provide resources. And I do have some really robust trainings in this area that are introductions, that's really hands-on. And then if a person wants to go deeper into it, I can offer different organizations that take you into a deep, deep dive. So it's wonderful. But it's so
Absolutely.
great to connect with you, Khara. And thank you for inviting me here and for being curious and for now letting all these other people know about this amazing thing called Sandtray.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, that's where I feel like you're a gift to our community because like I'm just here showcasing what's awesome and out there for clinicians who are hungry to learn more and have other modalities and interventions and skills they can use in the room.
Yeah.
I know in our first video I plugged that yes, you are doing awesome trainings on this and you're actually keynoting next year internationally because this video will go out before the end of the year. So yay. So I will make sure all those links are below our video.
Sweaty palms. I am excited. Therapeutic presence is my thing, and that's just I words are like it's just so good. Therapeutic presence. Maybe we'll talk
Awesome.
about that when I find words.
Yes, yeah, we might have to be back on the channel to talk about what your keynote felt like. And I know it's brought up some nerves. You said sweaty palms, but like so exciting that people see the value of what you have to offer. So, Barbara, thank you
Yeah,
again for jumping back on video with me for this
my pleasure.
experience. And viewers, stay tuned for more videos. We'll see you next time.